What's a dead giveaway someone is a creep? Story 1. They don't understand personal space. Had an old man at work come up and start stroking my hair. He said it looked like cotton candy. It was pink and blue. It went on for a bit too long. I worked with a guy who didn't last too long that was like that. We had to teach him that if you were within an extended arm's length of someone, you were too close. So he would approach people and put his arms out pseudo-Nazi-like, and then drop his arm to his side before he even tried to say hello. That guy sounds like he might be autistic. He literally doesn't know he's being weird. Story 2. They constantly have interactions where everyone else is completely crazy. Normal people don't get banned from Costco, spit on gas station attendants, and get tased by the cops. If this crap happens to you, you're probably a creepy weirdo. And yes, I'm sure all of your ex-girlfriends were the problem. I knew a guy. He was a coworker, and I went out with him and another coworker to a club. I didn't like him at all, and had a funny feeling about him, but the other coworker was alright, so I figured everything would be fine. Within the night, he showed me a pornographic video of himself unprompted, stole tips from the bar counter, and insisted I have a drink, even though I was DD and had previously told him I wouldn't be drinking, which he got very angry about because he bought it and handed it to me. At the end of the night, we went to 7-Eleven. The cashier instantly got angry as soon as he saw this guy and threatened to call the cops if he didn't leave. The guy just laughed it off and refused to explain what that was all about, only to explain that people are crazy and blow things out of proportion all the time. I never hung out with him again after that. He got fired a few weeks later after getting into a fight and going to jail. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. Had a compulsory work dinner, and met the wife of one of our team. She had rainbowed layered hair, and my 8-year-old daughter asked her how she did her hair like that, and she said, "Piss off and mind your own business." She was confused and super defensive when the whole team called her out on it. Her husband was so embarrassed, he put in for a transfer. If you've been thrown out of multiple establishments during your lifetime, you are most certainly a lunatic. Story 3. They make comments that are absolutely out of line, like sexual or violent comments, like it's normal. It's one thing to joke, but you can just tell when someone is being serious. That's the thing too, is some people doing that are just testing the waters. If you don't react negatively, they read it as a green light to keep doing it and to push the boundaries even further. If you do respond negatively, then suddenly, hey, it was just a joke. Why are you being so sensitive, you justice warrior, snowflake, free speech, etc.? Story 4. Grown men who tell teenage girls that they're mature for their age. Ah man, I said this once to the mom of twins and I still cringe thinking about it, but I genuinely meant it as a compliment about a kid I used to babysit 10 years ago. The twins were so well-mannered and smart for their age. Not that I would want to date them. Either way, I won't use that phrase again as I see what some use it to mean. Grown men who tell prepubescent girls they're going to be a heartbreaker when they grow up. Ew. Alternatively, grown women who say stuff like, "I bet the girls at school are lining up for you. I bet you beat the girls off with a stick." I had this one told to me so much that not only was it not true, I thought there was something wrong with me. Turns out some older women are just creeps. My 40-something-year-old supervisor hired a 16-year-old high schooler, and as she was leaving, after her second day of work, he stood there and watched her leave, for far longer than he should have, basically staring at her as she was walking away, and said, "Man, she's gonna be a killer when she grows up. They need to keep her locked up." It seems like a lot of old men think it's okay to hit on teenagers. Yuck. Story 5. Where's my hug? How about a smile? You look so much prettier when you smile. Weirdly enough, I've only ever heard this directed at males. When I was in college and working at Goodwill, there was a specific middle-aged woman who always asked me to smile and then would say something to the extent of, "Life isn't that bad." I always found it funny that she had the most dejected and tired expression on her face as she lectured me about smiling. I winced reading this. When I was a teenager working for fast food, there was an old guy who looked me dead in the eye, took his index fingers to either sides of his mouth, and pushed them up to make the creepiest looking grin, held up by his fingers, but said nothing. There was a glass pane between us so the customers had a full view of us working. Literally felt like a zoo animal sometimes because of entitled creeps like him. I'm guilty of this one. Said it a lot as a kid because my sister's friends would always say it to me when I gave her a hug. I'm autistic. I was very huggy when I was younger. So I just thought, oh, that's what we do when we want affection. Didn't realize how creepy it was. I was 23 when I stopped saying that. Before anyone gets the wrong idea, I was the youngest. It might not always come from a creepy place, but it's definitely creepy. Story 6. My wife had a male coworker who built a diorama of one of her female coworkers being eaten alive by a tarantula. He then thought it would be a good idea to show the diorama to her and other coworkers. Management found him a job at another company rather than firing him. My wife and her coworkers were relieved that he was gone, grateful that he wasn't likely to consider his separation antagonistic, but worried about his future coworkers. Not really a universally applicable sign, but definitely an unambiguous sign. That's commitment. Story 7. They tell you who you are and what you like, and if you stand up for yourself, they gaslight you and try to play games with your boundaries to break them down. Those are the worst manipulators out there. Try to tell you who and what you are and implant that in your head, and then use it against you when they see fit. It's seriously effed up. Sadly, I had to get one of my lady friends away from a dude who was pulling this stuff on her. Took a few weeks of explaining how this guy was messing with her head in order to lock her in. She let me look at his texts, and I kid you not, every other line this guy said something manipulating AF. Like a walking definition of manipulation. It seriously pissed me off how crappy this guy was to her. When she tried to go no contact, he started stalking her, and eventually she ended up getting a restraining order on the guy. I also threatened him, but she never knew about that. It was only after those things that he finally left her alone. I had this to a lesser extent. Had this good friend when I was figuring out my sexuality because I found that I was attracted to this guy, who was also around the good friend because we were a group of 3, who is now my fiance. Anytime I would talk about what I thought I was, that good friend would be like, no, you just want to be like us. Or if I said I liked something and he was surprised I liked it, he would be like, no, I don't think you do. Such a dickhead. Sadly, me and my boyfriend let him move in before we realized what an asshole he was, but we eventually had him move out, and haven't talked to him in over 7 months. I hope that becomes a for the rest of our life. What a gross dude. Story 8. Adults beg children to give them a kiss or a hug despite being told no. Adults taking pictures of children after being told no. My wife's cousin, everybody. My daughter asked her to stop taking pictures of her. I told her to stop more forcefully as well. She took a picture of me telling her to stop taking pictures of my daughter. Then she dumped all the pictures on Facebook, where she has over 1,000 friends, most of whom aren't family or people I would be comfortable sharing pictures of my kids with. My grandmother once told me that when she was little, her dad would try to take pictures of her when she was in the bathroom, and how she would scream no and struggle to keep the door closed, but he would succeed in getting the door open and take the pictures. I was like 5 when she told me. It didn't sit right with me, but I didn't realize until years later just how awful and disgusting that was. That stuff makes me so glad I grew up before the internet. I was at a family reunion recently where someone had a bunch of pictures of me as a kid, one of which was of me completely naked at an age where it seemed pretty inappropriate. All I had to do was just tear up the photo and throw it away. Boom, done. If that happened 15 years later, I would have to bend over backward for weeks just to get Facebook to even respond and tell me to F off. Life was way simpler before the web. Story 9. Attempts to isolate you from your friends, or to take you out of public space to go somewhere alone with them. I have this family friend who was always trying to arrange one-on-one time with my younger teen sister for anything she expressed interest in. Wanted to teach her how to drive, give piano lessons, etc. Finally called him out on that stuff and told her to keep her guard up, but everyone loves him, so you can't completely distance him away. If you're going on a date or something, it's perfectly normal to want to be alone or not with a huge group. It's honestly a red flag if someone is super pushy to make you hang out in groups. I'm not a social person, and I won't be able to be myself fully if I'm in a new group of people. I've only had terrible experiences going along with stuff like this. You can never be too safe these days. Story 10. Obsessed with sex. I met a girl through a game that I'm a fan of, and she would always talk about groping men and talk extremely sexually about face models, cosplayers, and voice actors. She also has a really bad anger problem and low self-esteem, so she was always charged up. The weird sex obsession, comments telling everyone about her entire sex life and history, and getting mad when men wouldn't let her grope them was so uncomfortable, and other girls in the group just fed into it. This was me as a teen/young adult. I cringe so hard that my face turns inside out sometimes. I said and did some horrible, inappropriate things. honestly. I thank magic mushrooms for snapping me out of it and making me a more empathetic human being. I shudder to imagine who I would be without them. I had a woman cyberstalking me who only ever talked about sex in her socials and about a couple K-pop bands that she liked. The gross part of it was she was between 10 and 15 years older than the members of those groups. She was also lusting after the youngest in one of the groups when he was still a teenager. For years, people had called her out for this, from what I've been told, and her go-to response was always that people were being ageist, racist, and homophobic when they were calling her out for her predatory and pedophilic behavior. Oh, and her mom, who is in her 70s, behaves the same way towards the two K-pop groups. It's definitely creepy, regardless of gender. Story 11. I have problems trying to meet new people, like shy and awkward, and it leaves me terrified women will assume I'm one of the nice guys who are incels who blame women for their lack of success. Aside from some obvious things, this thread isn't as comforting as I'd hoped. I feel you, dude. I'm autistic, and when some people ask about traits of weirdos, most people just list autistic traits. Not intentionally, of course, and we just have to learn how to deal with it. But you know, this stuff hurts sometimes. You're just shy. There's nothing wrong with being shy or awkward. Lots and lots of people are, and lots of people have the same fear as you. From my experience, people who don't know how to talk to people talk about the most interesting stuff and are great to listen to. You're worrying too much. Seriously. You are shy, but I'm sure you have so much more than that. I feel that so hard. I was raised with a heavy, never invite yourself mindset. Now that I'm an adult, it's made it hard to even develop friendships, let alone meet someone, because I always just assume if the person wanted to know or hang out with me, they would have asked. It's an introvert's nightmare. Story 12. Anyone who acts too familiar or comfortable with you after just meeting you or barely knowing you, especially if they ask a lot of really personal or inappropriate questions really fast, like stuff about your sex life, dating history, childhood, etc. Oh man, these are all of the conversation topics my boyfriend and I had on our first date, and we barely knew each other prior to that. To be fair though, that date ended up lasting for over 24 hours and we've been together for 5 years now, so we're compatible weirdos at least. I've met someone during high school who found my account. I never knew them IRL, and they were super creepy, always asking personal questions and then trauma dumping when we had just met. I'm glad I make people feel comfortable when talking to me, but when it's to that extent, online friends always just feel a bit weird when you meet them for the first time. Story 13. I'm a guy, but a semi-frequent bar patron. Whenever guys ask bartenders what time they get off, that they've had little to no interaction with is incredibly creepy. Gives off, "I'll be waiting for you in the parking lot" vibes. It is not even just in bars. I did a summer job in my library and a guy kept asking about my shifts. My male manager had to ask him to leave me alone. When I was around 20 or 21, I was working as a barista. We had floor-to-ceiling windows on one side of our cafe in a busy area. Some guy, maybe mid-30s, was walking by outside and it looked like he was coming into our store. We locked eyes, so I offered a half-hearted customer service smile as one does. He turned the corner to the front of our store, blocked partially by a brick wall, no windows, but never came inside. I didn't think much of it and just continued on with my day. About 3 to 4 hours later, my shift was over. I walked outside to the parking lot and heard a, "Finally, you're off work." I turned around expecting to see a coworker or maybe a regular customer I was friends with or something. Nope, it was the guy I locked eyes with for 5 seconds several hours earlier. He was sitting at a table on our patio but was blocked by the brick wall so I couldn't see him through the windows from inside the store. I was really startled and didn't know what to say. He then proceeded to tell me that he saw me smile at him through the window, so he decided to wait outside of my work for several hours so that he could talk to me. I mean, it would be one thing to come into the store, buy a coffee and try to talk to me, although I still wouldn't appreciate that while at work, but this man waited outside of my work for several hours. I was so creeped out and made an excuse like, "Oh, actually I'm just adjusting the umbrellas on the patio, I still have work," and then I went straight back inside and to the back where I waited for a full hour until my coworkers confirmed he was gone. I was so scared and had male coworkers walk me to my car for like a week. Smart that they went back inside so smoothly. Story 14. When they sit next to you when you're the only 2 people in a place with so many seats. This happened to me once on the bus. There were literally about 30 free seats. The genders were reversed, however, me as the guy and the other random a woman. I was so confused for a second, said excuse me, she let me out and I moved to a different seat. I was dumbfounded the rest of the day after that experience. Some people are just nuts. As an aside, I'm fascinated by the psychological effect of sitting next to someone in a full bus/room versus when it empties out. A few times the train has emptied out and I've been left next to one person with no one else around, and it's hugely uncomfortable, even though nothing has changed except the presence or proximity of other people. Once other people are gone, you're no longer sitting next to someone, you're sitting with them. And I feel this huge discomfort, like there's pressure to interact in some way or there's forced intimacy. Weird. The problem is that moving away might come across as rude, so most people just stick to their seats. Story 15. Hey, where do you work? Oh, which one? Yeah, there's like 6 of them. Which one do you work at? No, I won't show up at your work, lol. Hey, did you block me? What did I do wrong? Worse is when you have one follow you to work. I had to ask a male coworker to pretend to be my partner to get this creep to go away. I did the opposite of that. I was talking to a girl on Tinder and told her after she stopped responding, hey, no hard feelings for ghosting me, but your work is on your profile, and they only have one location. That's very unsafe. If you talk to the wrong type of guy, he could find you. She changed her work to her occupation instead of the employer and said something like, thank you, I didn't think of that. Sorry I ghosted you. You didn't do anything wrong, I'm just depressed. I haven't heard from her since, never unmatched, just kinda gone. But she replied to my warning in like 10 minutes, so I just don't believe that she isn't checking Tinder anymore. So I'm not proud to admit this, but I was the guy in this scenario once, many years ago. One night there was a woman who was riding the same bus as me. We got into a brief exchange which started innocuously enough. Then at some point I asked her what she does for work. She mentioned a business with multiple locations, and without thinking first I asked her which one. She hesitated before she replied by saying something to the effect of, it's not really something I want to talk about with strangers. I quickly brought the conversation to an end after this and played it cool until the bus made it to my stop, so as to avoid causing her any further discomfort. She said bye and I sort of half-heartedly waved back. To tell you the truth, I knew the moment the words came out of my mouth that I had just asked a very intrusive question, and I immediately recognized that it made her uncomfortable, but I'm not even sure why I broached it in the first place. My handling of it afterwards was geared towards counteracting the impression that I was coming on to her, so as to minimize whatever unease I may have already caused. I don't remember if I apologized, but I did feel bad about how I must have made her feel. I've since been much more cautious about the questions I ask people who I don't know yet. I strive to be an empathetic person and to always be mindful of the boundaries of people around me. I am far from perfect, but I try really hard to be the best version of myself that I can be. Story 16. Speaking as a 5'2" woman, guys you barely know or even total strangers lifting you up off the ground to hug you. Yeah, as a 6'2", well over 200-pound man, it's a major struggle finding the right way to hug a much smaller person. There's legit no good way that doesn't involve either of them just putting their face into my chest, which just feels too intimate for a casual hug, me getting way too low and breaking my knees, and being smitten by gravity, or a sudden explosion of shoulder-on-chin violence that I'm genuinely terrified of inflicting on people. Seriously, has anyone got any tips though? I could probably use them. Oh my god, I once went on a date with a guy who really didn't want to take my "I don't think this will work out, best of luck," and was pretty much ignoring that I'd said it and was carrying on like there would be a next date. He told me he was going to give me his patented bear bell hug. Whatever dude, hug me then go away, right? So he picks me up by grabbing me in a bear hug, pinning my arms down and swings me so that my legs fly back and forth like the clapper on a bell. And I was wearing a skirt, so I flashed the whole street. Then he asks me if I want another hug. No dude, no, I do not ever want another hug from you. Lifting anyone other than your best friend or significant other off the floor is a hell no. Story 17. When I was 19, I was a phone girl at a local pizza place. I would answer the phone and take people's orders for carryout or delivery. One time, this guy called and said he was placing an order for delivery. By the end of the order, he changed his mind and said he wanted to order carryout. The dude shows up and my coworker helps him, and he says, "You're not the girl I talked to on the phone. I want to talk to that girl." I realize he's talking about me and I ask what's wrong. He then tells me he thinks I have a really soothing voice and I should do ASMR. I was like, okay, that's weird, but relatively harmless. The guy gets his food and then leaves. We can see him sitting in his car for like 15 minutes. Then he came back into the store with a map and started asking me a bunch of weird questions for directions. I said, "Why can't you just use Google Maps? I see you have an iPhone," and pointed to his phone. Then, as I point, I see him try to hide the screen. He had the audio recorder pulled up. This weirdo came back into the store with a thinly veiled excuse of asking for directions because he was trying to record my voice. It was so creepy, I told him, "Wait 1 second," and then went into the back and told some coworkers what was going on. A friend of mine who worked in the kitchen, a 6'2" musclehead, walked out and was like, "I'm great with directions. My girlfriend is terrible at them," while gesturing to me. "Let me help you." Suddenly, the guy didn't need directions anymore. So yeah, I'm gonna say whatever that was creepy. I've been told I sound like a girl over the phone. People get so shocked when they arrive to pick up their order and ask to speak to the same girl they were talking to on the phone. As I get older, we shall see if that changes to me sounding like a woman, but every single customer has always said girl. This is only slightly related, but once my job had the awful idea of doing a jokey awards thing during a senior management meeting. A 60-plus-year-old director of the company declared me the sexiest voice. I was the most junior person in a room full of upper management, and one of the few women, and of course no other award was remotely sexual. Literally no one thought it was a big deal because for some reason it seemed like sexualizing someone's voice was okay. I had to continue communicating with the man over phone for my job. It felt extremely icky. It was almost as if they always have an ulterior motive when it comes to hiring more women. Story 18. Asking you out while you're at work or in a situation in which you cannot leave. Or if you're a bartender or waitress and they will only tip you if you talk to them or give out your number. Like, no, you can keep your tip. I'm working. I'm not here to keep you company. You can go find an escort if you want paid company. I'm a male bartender and it even happens to us. The worst part is, you can't walk away, like I'm glued to the bar. At least if you're a server or you work at a department store, oops, gotta run and walk away. We're just stuck. It is super awkward. 2 nights ago, I was working at a bar and another group of women decided to ask after I introduced myself if I was single, and when I said yes, they asked what my type was. I don't want to offend someone that I'm going to be taking care of for the next hour, but like, what do you say? I just always laugh and walk away. At least women who hit on me at work tend to tip very big. The women I have worked with say that men who hit on them usually tip very badly. Men are definitely worse than women when it comes to this scenario. Story 19. So casually steamroll your objections to their attention. They'll drive you home. It's right around the corner. Nah, don't waste your money on the app. He's going that way anyway. Don't worry, he's not that kind of guy. He's married, etc., 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 until you hide in the restroom and call a friend or relative to pick you up instead. I'm a guy and I've had women act like this towards me. I'm pretty sure I got slipped something in a drink one time because I got really messed up after one drink, and some women who I think I've had one conversation with tried offering me a ride. Luckily, my bartender friend noticed something was up and she pulled me aside and fed me and gave me water and coffee. Ugh, this happened to me on a first date with a guy last month. I wasn't feeling it and I had only met him twice, so I decided to take an Uber home because I didn't want this guy I just met to know where I lived. He kept insisting that he could take me home and that it was just stupid to spend money on a ride when he could give me one for free. Yeah, but I think I'll be fine. I hate that rationale so much. Like, yeah dude, you could, but then you'd know where I live. No thanks. Story 20. Continue trying to get your attention when you are not engaging with them. One day, at my new job as a med lab scientist, I'm sitting at the microscope, minding my own business, analyzing patient blood smears. All of a sudden, I hear from behind me, from across the lab, "Hey, you redhead. Hi. Hello. Redhead Lady. Hi." It was not only rude to shout at me as if I knew him, but I had no reason to ever interact with this man. He worked in a different lab, but had come into my lab to grab his samples from the central processing area. I was the majority creeped out. After I ignored his shouting, he never came up to me, never introduced himself to me, never asked my name, but when we occasionally crossed paths in the hallway, he would always make eyes at me and then go out of his way to be obnoxiously friendly, even after I continually ignored him. He was a very creepy old man, and none of the younger women I worked with liked him, as they all had similar experiences. Is that creepy, or is it just annoying? Because I feel like it falls under the latter. Story 21. I have a coworker. I had never met him officially before we started working at the same place 2 years ago. He gave me a weird vibe from the get-go, but I just avoided him as much as I could, which was easy because we don't have the same job at our facility. After a while, he starts talking about 2 brothers that I do know, and how he was friends with one of them. Okay, fine, a little creepy that you know I knew them too. Then he asked when I moved from X address where I lived with my ex. I shut that down and straight out said that was a creepy comment and that it made me uncomfortable. I now avoid him even more at work, but a few months pass and he starts asking how long I lived at my address and that it was when I was hanging out with a specific group of people. I asked him how he knew about 2 past addresses and who my friends were since I never met him before. Oh, he and that one brother sometimes talk about me. I have not spoken to either of those 2 brothers for 5 years. That is creepy as hell. This is serious. My wife's older sister had a stalker who followed her for years before finally introducing himself. She had no idea, and they dated briefly before she shut it down. He broke into her apartment one night when she had a friend over, abducted her and shot her, then shot himself. The police determined that he had been moving for several years to stay close to her. He most likely saw her at a gym initially. Stalking should always be taken seriously because you have no idea how far they are willing to take it. We had a guy like that at my work, and he showed up to one of the women's coworkers' houses uninvited, thinking they would hang out. I know for a fact she had never expressed any desire to be around this guy. She was disturbed by this. I had not been aware at the time, but there had been previous complaints against him, but HR and his supervisor botched it. He should have been gone a long time prior to it getting to that point. Stalkers are absolutely terrifying and surprisingly common. Story 22. Staring too long. A glance is fine, but staring too long just comes off as suspicious. I have bad anxiety, and so even if I just looked someone's way, if they look at me, my knee-jerk reaction is to quickly look away. A lot of times, I feel like this makes it seem like I just got caught staring even though I wasn't. So if you look over at a guy and see him quickly look away, does that come off as if they were being creepy? If so, what would you consider the appropriate course of action? I would assume 2 possibilities. 1, he was staring and quickly looked away to seem like he wasn't, or 2, he was zoning out while deep in thought, noticed that I noticed him looking my way, and quickly looked away to refrain from seeming like he was staring. I noticed this matches your reasoning. I would most likely assume anxiety plays a part with this possibility. Either way, I usually don't mind as long as it's not a continuous thing. In my opinion, if he looks away, it shows that he acknowledges and respects my comfort zone in some way. It becomes creepy or awkward when a guy or anyone stares and looks away several times, or when they don't bother looking away at all. That's me. I zone out so many times and catch myself accidentally staring at people. I swear I didn't mean to. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.